I talked about general changes, I talked about the magic changes, and I talked about the mission changes in terms of how that affects the entire game. But how does it affect you specifically if you play Warriors of Chaos? This is the first video. I'm aiming to get one of these out every day where I'm going to be covering a faction in depth, talking about how they're looking post 1.5 changes, and then do some list building at the end. Give some examples of where I think the faction is going to move towards, and look at the strengths and weaknesses of the faction they're in. As a quick recap, I'm going to go through all of the specific changes for Warriors of Chaos. I'm not going to go over all of the actual changes by looking at the PDF, but I have summarized the ones that I think make the most difference in terms of Warriors of Chaos, and we'll go through those after this PDF. So, first of all, the biggest change, I would say, arguably, is you've got, now, you can have demonic mounts for all of the Chaos Lord level characters. So that's your Chaos Lord, your Exalted Champion, your Aspiring Champion. All of your melee characters there are able to buy demonic mounts, which is nice, but probably not too game-changing. 35 points for +1 wound. I maybe don't bother with that on the Aspiring Champions unless I've got a specific use for it. But the restrictions here, Manticores go from being Chaos Lords only to being Exalted Champions and Chaos Lords, and Chaos Dragons also allow you to take them on Exalted Champions. This is an absolutely massive change. This comes hand in hand with a 500 point cap that we saw in the Matched Play book, which will be releasing this weekend coming. So we know that the Chaos Lord was sat at about, I think, 480 points before you put any equipment on them, if you put them on the back of a dragon. And when I say equipment, I mean flail and shield. So this is a really big difference. Really nice that you're able to put a less expensive character on. And when we have a look at builds, we'll have a look at it as well. It means that you can still have a triple save dragon, which is something that Warriors of Chaos looked like they were going to be losing for a while. Now, that dragon is only toughness 5, but I think triple save probably outweighs the fact that you're only toughness 5, and you're still weapon skill 6 with 6 attacks and strength 7. So it's an interesting build, and I'm quite excited to put some Exalted Champions on dragons on the table. There's a reason for that as well. You can also take a Chaos Lord on foot or on horse. So we'll get into that later in the builds, but this is a really big change. Something that if you're a Chaos player who was worried that they were going to be losing their Chaos Dragons, don't worry. Maybe you put a little bit less focus into the dragon and more into something else, but you can do both. You can absolutely like double down and just do both. Chaos Trolls, they now have Motley Crew and they can take multiple different weapons. I don't think this actually makes any real game change differences. This is more just if you've got a collection of the, the resin or metal models, they do come with a range of different weapons. So instead of just having to say they all have great weapons, you can represent them as they come equipped. Nice quality of life change, no issues there. Chaos Knights, add countercharge to the list of special rules. I don't understand why the Strength and Toughness 4 3-up armor save core knights with a million choices available to them also get countercharge. This is really good. There is a world where we just look at playing a big 1500 point Death Star of Chaos Knights, 500 points of the Chaos Knights themselves, and then 1000 points of characters to go in there. Maybe that's not something you want to do, that's fine. That's okay. Warriors of Chaos have probably the most build diversity, apart from maybe Tomb Kings, but one of the most build diversities that you can have in Old World right now, in terms of builds that look good as well, not just things that you could technically put on the table. Chaos Dragon, add impetuous to the list of special rules. Now this is a bit of a bugger, but this does come with a couple of special rules. We'll go into it in more depth with the actual dragon rules, but the Chaos Lord on dragon is the only dragon that still gets a combat res bonus of +1 in combat, because your unit strength has to be 10 now to get +1 combat res for being close order. As a trade-off, it gets impetuous, but also the Exalted Champion can ride a Chaos Dragon. They don't get the close order bonus. They only have 9 wounds, so their unit strength 9. And they're still impetuous. A little bit of an odd change. I think it makes sense thematically. I'm not sure it needed to be done as a games balance tool, but honestly, this faction is looking incredible. So having a slight limitation there, not the end of the world. Oh, and also impetuous has changed. It's now a leadership test. So, yeah, not the end of the world, just the... I think the only nerf that they got. Oh, I guess there's 2, but yeah, not a meaningful change, I would say. Well, actually, no, there's more than 2. So, auras, and this is, in terms of dragons, this isn't a real nerf, but you might have wanted to put these on chariots. The 2 best chaos gifts, Enchanting Aura and Diabolic Splendor, now have to be, they can only put on infantry or cavalry, which means that you weren't going to be putting them on dragons anyway, because they're 30-35 points. They're, one gives you -1 to be hit against shooting, one gives you strike's last aura. They're both very strong, but you capped at 500 points. You weren't going to be putting those on top of a dragon anyway. However, they would have been really nice to have on chariot lords, and chariots have got a lot better, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So a bit of a shame that you can't have enchanting aura on a chaos lord on chosen chariot, but again, the faction's really good. It's not the end of the world that it's losing it, and the things that aren't infantry and cavalry typically have enough wounds and layered defenses that you get to hit anyway. You might not hit first, but you'll get to swing out anyway, so it's not the end of the world. Infernal Puppet, this has been nerfed and buffed. I would say it is a nerf, even though it is something of a side grade. Basically, it's gone from being a 24-inch bubble of making your opponent cast on 3d6, drop the highest, to a 15-inch bubble. So that's a huge difference in terms of board space. However, it now does affect bound spells. Or I believe it did, unless it's been changed here. Does that say further down the page? Oh, I think it said, yes, there we go. Can Infernal Puppet be used against a bound spell? I knew I'd read it somewhere. I was just doubling down on reading it in the wrong place. So yeah, so it's a much smaller bubble in terms of nerfing enemy casting, but enemy casting is going to be weaker anyway, so this might still be worth taking in terms of you can just really punish them if they double down on it. It's still quite expensive. But, yes, not a bad change. As someone who plays against Warriors of Chaos quite a lot, I'm happy to see it. It gives more agency for the player against it, but it's still a very strong tool. Think about it. It's a 30-plus inch bubble, which is a lot of the table, given that you've got a 15-inch range around you, so not too bad. Dragon Ogres go up 3 points. Sure. That's absolutely fine. Not worried about that at all. This is a love tap. This is like the Pegasus Knight nerf, which is not really a nerf at all. You will have to find a few points somewhere in the list, which is not a problem, because you're no longer running a 650-point Dragon Lord. So, makes it nice and easy. Just down to the FAQ questions, there's, as we've talked about already, Infernal Puppet can be used against bound spell. Yes, great stuff. When fighting a Warrior's Duel challenge, so this is Wolves of the Sea, are things such as magic standard carried by their units counted? No. So basically, when you do your start of game challenge, unit champion versus unit champion, 1 wound models only, they don't get any benefits from the unit themselves. It's just the what they have, what they're carrying, which does make sense. They've jumped out of their units to go and fight a duel. And then this little chestnut: if a character joins a unit of skin wolves, can they be transfigured by the warped form special rule? No. What they should have done is just put a rule here saying that unit special rules do not apply to the characters that join them, but this is one of the more egregious ones that needed to be clarified, so good to see that. So there are some changes in here that look like nerfs, but I would say Warriors of Chaos have actually got better overall as a faction comparably to everyone else. Why? Well, they play missions really well, and the things that got buffed are frankly ludicrous. I'm really not sure why you can have countercharge and Chaos Knights, and having dragons for Exalted Champions feels incredibly good. So let's have a look at what the other changes are in terms of Warriors of Chaos. Again, I did a full read through of the FAQ as it came out as a live stream, and also did a video where I broke down how the changes affected the most common things in the game. So this is not a full overview. If you want to see more about those, they'll be linked down below, I'm sure. But let's have a look at what changes I've picked out specifically affect Warriors of Chaos in the ways that we want to play them. So first of all, general changes. We've got casting changes. Now, remember that you went from having plus wizard level to your level of casting to plus half your wizard level rounded up. If you're a level 4 wizard, you get plus 2 to cast. If you're a level 2 wizard, you get plus 1 to cast. And this is the same for level 1s and level 3s. A level 3 wizard still getting plus 2 to cast. Okay, so that's definitely a nerf. We have seen some rebalancing of spell laws in terms of some spells have dropped in value. Again, I did a video on that a couple of days ago. You can find that one where I went through the maths on how that changes your ability to cast spells and how powerful it is to get bonuses to cast, whether that is power scrolls or flat bonuses to cast. Now, this faction has 2 very easy to access bonuses to cast. Skull of Catan is a little bubble that gives plus 1 to cast for all wizards. Mark of Tzeentch gives you plus 1 to cast if you are within a unit strength 10 unit that also has Mark of Tzeentch. This is huge, because Scoring, a lot of the scoring we're looking at is you have to be unit strength 10, and usually you have to be core as well. So you're probably going to want to bring bigger unit strength 10 units that might want to be on objectives anyway. And +1 to cast went from being I guess a 25% increase to a 50% increase in value. If you were casting at +4, getting a flat +1 to your casting means that you're only 25% better. Now that we're only getting +2 to cast natively, you're getting +50%. You're getting, almost, well, you're getting exactly half again of what you were doing, and you can combo these super easily. Skull Catan probably a little bit expensive in terms of just a flat cast bonus. I might only be looking to do this if I'm looking at bringing multiple casters, and you've got to remember spells like Blue Fire of Tzeentch haven't actually got changes. Some of the spells got changes. Something I should mention as well, if we're talking about casting, Pillar of Fire, one of the mainstays in terms of the battle magic caster, where you'd go Fireball, Blue Fire, Pillar of Fire, and just double down or triple down on the amount of range damage you can do. That build is worse. Ruby Ring of Ruin is worse as well, so they've nerfed actual direct damage in terms of spells. It might end up still being a good way for Warriors of Chaos to go, because they don't really have any other ways to pick off stuff at range, and being able to deal with screening units or scoring units is very important without having to get there, especially if you're going for one sort of big bust. But I think that casting is definitely moving more in the way of, if you're going for buffs, Demonology casters already really strong for Warriors of Chaos, now even stronger, and depending on what you go with, you might end up just picking a Lore Familiar instead of a Spell Familiar, going with a level 3 Wizard, finding that you're spending significantly less points on your caster than you were previously. So some changes across the board, and I think Warriors of Chaos are one of the factions that can adapt to the casting changes better than pretty much anyone else. Vanguard charge changes. This is just worth mentioning because there is a Vanguard banner. You weren't realistically charging with your Wolfhounds, Corehounds, Direhounds, the dogs, the 30-point units of 35 points of dogs with Vanguards. You weren't charging with those anyway. You were putting them in marching column and then just sort of firing them around the map, so that's not a problem there. There is a Vanguard banner for Heralds of Darkness, which now you can't Vanguard forwards and charge on the same turn, which means you probably don't pick it up. The reason for that is if you Vanguard and then go second and your opponent just parks, I don't know, a dragon in front of you, for example, you have absolutely no answer to that. You can't even charge in a fight when now you might be happy to get in, because you can, potentially do a lot of win on combat res, but we'll talk about that more when we get to the dragon changes. So Vanguard banner, probably dead. Vanguard on dogs, still really good. You're still going to get a lot of aggressive play out of it, and it helps you score objectives early if you start to take bigger units of Warhounds. Warhounds, that's the name of them. Maximum armor value has changed. This is lesser change for Warriors of Chaos, and one of the reasons why they've gone up in the meta in my estimation. There are now ways to get better saves on Infantry, which we'll get to when we talk about Infantry, but you're capped at a 3-up armor save if you're not Infantry or Cavalry. Now, you were basically never running a 2-up save on anything that wasn't Infantry or Cavalry. In fact, I'm not 100% sure you could, because the only way to get pluses to save, which I believe is Bedazzling Helm, for Warriors of Chaos, was something that you couldn't actually put on a chariot. It was Infantry or Cavalry only. So I think this doesn't affect Warriors of Chaos at all, but in terms of the meta, there's no more 2-up save High Elf Dragons, for example. No 2-up save Black Orc Chariots, all these sorts of things. So, comparably, Warriors of Chaos got better. Good stuff there. Stupidity has been nerfed. I only mention this not because Chaos Trolls exist, because I don't think anyone really takes them, but I am mentioning it because if you roll on the Gaze of the Gods table and you get a 1 and you become stupid, it is now more punishing. You now cannot move, you cannot cast spells at all, and it's bad times, basically. You do not want to be stupid. So, how does this change Warriors of Chaos? Make sure you've got Favors of the God, the 5-point magic item that lets you re-roll it. Don't aggressively re-roll on the table unless you really need to. Probably don't bother rolling on your wizards at all unless it's in the last couple of turns of the game and you're stuck in combat already. You don't have to test Stupidity if you're stuck in combat, so probably hold off on the Stupidity, the Gaze of the Gods tables on wizards, unless you really want to risk losing a large amount of output if you've gone for that blaster build. Impetuous has changed as well. As mentioned, the Chaos Dragon is now impetuous, so it's good to know, but also Forsaken are impetuous. Forsaken look really solid. They're quite expensive, but it's a big Death Star. Well, not Death Star. You can go for a big unit of them unsupported to have them hold objectives pretty well. They're toughness 4 with a 5-up save and a 5-up ward. They have a good amount of attacks, and you can kit them out to either be more killy in combat or have a longer charge range. Marcus Slanesh giving plus charge is maybe going to be more valuable depending on how we see the meta change. I'm expecting to see more units of infantry hanging around because they're the best things at standing on objectives for, scoring points turn after turn. So, you might move away from Mark of Khorne to Marcus Slanesh. We'll have to see how the meta picks up, but I do like that as an option. Anyway, Impetuous has changed from a 50-50 where you roll a dice at the start of the charge phase. If you didn't want to charge on a 1-2-3, you had to. Now it's just a flat leadership test. So if you fail the leadership, leadership test, you have to charge, but that's a lot better than it was. Much better odds, especially if you've got a leadership 9 general kicking around there as well. If we look at specifically the dragon changes, because this is a big thing, obviously starting off we've got the 500 points cap, and we've got Impetuous as well. The dragon's gone from being completely controllable to being slightly uncontrollable. This is one of the reasons I'm less bothered about putting a Lord on Chaos Dragon, on top of the fact that you can't control it. But having your general be Impetuous, it's not the end of the world, but it is a little bit limiting. Close Order combat res bonus. This has gone from being, if you're a unit strength 5 and Close Order, you got +1 to your combat resolution score in combat. Now you have to be unit strength 10. The only dragon in the game, outside of a very silly high elf build, is the Chaos Lord on dragon, so you get your +1 combat res there. I will say, I don't think I recommend the Chaos Lord. I think I really like the Exalted Champion, but if you want to go with the Chaos Lord, because it does have some advantages, higher strength, more attacks on the Lord, and you've also got, don't forget, you've got the toughness 6 as well, which is a big difference, to be fair. Yeah, so you would still have the combat res there. But again, this is something that is a little bit punishing just in general for Warriors of Chaos, because they quite liked previously running smaller units. Now you're going to have to bulk out your units a little bit, but you do also have a dragon that can potentially be scoring you combat res in combat. Challenge changes. Now, this is a big one. Everything happens at initiative step now. And what do I mean? If you go into a challenge, you can still get overkill, but overkill stops as soon as the initiative step moves on. No more swinging with your Chaos Lord and then the dragon and then doing your stomps. If you kill the opponent with, just your Chaos Lord's attacks, you lose the dragon's attacks. So that's quite a big change there. How are we going to play around that? Well, I like putting an Exalted Champion on top of a dragon, which means that you've got lower quality of attacks. You could argue that the Chaos Lord previously was doing more damage in combat than the dragon was, especially if you were equipped with like an Ogre Blade or something. Now I'm more tempted to give my Exalted Champion a great weapon. The reason a great weapon's really good is it puts your initiative lower than that of the dragon. If your initiative is lower than the dragon, you get to make 6 attacks. It's weapon skill 6, same as the Exalted Champion, strength 7, AP 2. That's just better than anything you're going to equip the Exalted Champion with. So if you make sure you give your Exalted Champion a great weapon, if you do go for a dragon, you're going to get more out of the dragon when you go into a challenge. You're less likely to have issues with overcapping overkill. If you end up fighting like a 3-wound model, you could always do hand weapon shield with the Exalted Champion as well and try and chunk out 2 wounds before you roll the dragon. But anyway, by the by, challenges, you now can't just brainlessly charge into the front of a unit with a dragon on its own. You have to brainlessly charge in with 2 units, which is something I'm very excited to be doing. So, challenge changes, keep in mind you can't just charge the front of units and expect to win. Now, something to keep in mind as well, if you position better than your opponent and you get a flank charge, people will want to move through the ranks so that they can move their characters in terms of getting close to challenge you. A unit champion is not a character. You cannot move through the ranks with a unit champion. This is really important now with these dragon changes, because it means that you can't actually challenge out your opponent. It means that you're going to be able, if you can get a flank charge, and the unit champion's not in the flank for whatever reason it would be, I don't know how it would be, maybe they're in marching column or something. If you get that flank charge, they're not going to be able to challenge you. You then just get to kill most of the unit because you have a huge amount of damage. So keep that in mind when you're looking to play your dragons. Try and use them a little bit more smart, or just pair them with a unit that's got unit champions. That's a big change. Everything, if you're playing dragons, every unit should have a unit champion. If you're not playing a dragon, every unit should have a unit champion because you want to soak the charge against enemy dragons. So just keep that in mind in terms of how you're building your list as well. Initiative step. We talked about that already. Something to bring up here is the Manticore is Initiative 5. Now, the Exalted Champion is Initiative 5 as well. Given the way that all of the overkill happens at Initiative step, there is a world where you look at taking a Manticore character and you get your Exalted Champion attacks and you get your Manticore attacks. The Manticore attacks are pretty okay. It's 4 attacks, I think it's Strength 5, Weapon Skill 5, Strength 5, AP 2, which is not bad at all, comboed with the Exalted Champion's 4 attacks with whatever, you know, you decide to give them, maybe a flail because you're trying to play around that initiative step. So if you're looking to have a more solo character that can actually grind a little bit of combat res into unit champions, Manticores are the way to go. And Exalted Champions can have battle standard bearers. So you could have a BSB with War Banner on Manticore, flying around, having flat 2 combat res from the banner and the War Banner, doing some good damage, not really worrying too much when it goes into the front of infantry units. Can it kill ranked up or can it win against ranked up infantry units? Probably not. They do have +1 to their combat res now if they outnumber you, so you've got to be a little bit more careful with it, but you can hunt down smaller units pretty comfortably. Something to play around with. Large target changes. Now, only the 2nd rank can shoot. If a unit's moved, and it's a ranked up unit, and they have bows, only the 2nd rank can shoot at you. No longer do we have 90 strong units that are all shooting all of their poison shots at you. So this makes dragons go from a little bit, I'm not really sure if I want to bring them, to back to being really, really good again. Combo that with the poison changes. Poison has gone from being a 6 is an automatic wound on your roll to hit to a 6 is +2 to wound. This means that, again, between taking a lot less shots from big ranked up infantry units and the poison changes being, going from auto wounding to just +2 to wound, it's effectively half as good. Your dragons are probably going to survive to the end of battle most times, unless you do something silly like dying to combat res because you went into a challenge unsupported. And that is going to happen to people until, we get the hang of using dragons a little bit more. So, real nice buffs there to dragons. 500 point cap, we've talked about this already, but the Chaos Lord, 480 points before upgrades, too expensive to do anything realistically with. Exalted Champion on dragon, yes, it's toughness 5, it's only 9 wounds, same as most other dragons, but you can put, one of the 2 regen items that you can get for Warriors of Chaos, so you can have a triple save dragon. And I think a triple save dragon at toughness 5 is still really good, given the amount of output that you have. One of the reasons that I don't think you see the Moon Dragon for High Elves is you can just take the Star Dragon with triple saves without any issues, so why would you bother? But also you lose a decent amount of output. You're going down to only strength 6, which means in fights against other dragons you're losing a lot there. But anyway, Exalted Champion on dragon, big fan of that. Auras, infantry, cavalry only. We've talked about this already, Diabolic Splendor and Enchanting Aura. Enchanting Aura especially, where you were, giving a Strike's Last Aura to your opponent was really nice. That's gone away, but that's okay. Honestly, Strike's Last is less good now, given that if you've put it on an infantry or cavalry unit, there's potential for the dragon that you fight just to get all of their attacks because they're all striking at initiative 1. So something that you have to be a little bit more cognizant of when you're building your lists out, I guess. Exalted Champion access we've already talked about, and as I said as well, Manticore's a new choice also. I'm a little worried about Manticores in terms of putting an expensive character on them, because Manticores are only toughness 4 when you've got an Exalted Champion on them. That kind of sucks. Don't love the way that they did toughness with mounts. I'd quite like it just to be dragons are toughness 6 across the board, even if it's a wizard on them. Manticores are toughness 5 across the board, even if it's an elf on them, yada yada. That would be a better standardization in my mind, but never mind, it's not what we've got. We'll just have to live with it. Also, and we've talked about this already, Demonic Mounts for Aspiring Champions. 35 points for +1 wound and a couple of decent attacks. It's not bad. It's not bad. They are only initiative 3 though, so it's not as good as like a Royal Pegasus where you're the same initiative as the rider, so you can add some actual high value attacks in there. But still nice to have just in general. And remember, Demonic Mounts are cavalry. They are monstrous cavalry. The changes, just to be clear, there was a change in the FAQ. Where if you are a different unit type to the unit that you are in, you can be shot and you lose your lookout, sir. That specifically refers to infantry, cavalry, chariots. This doesn't refer to heavy or light infantry or monstrous infantry. So if you are monstrous cavalry inside of regular heavy cavalry, you cannot be targeted. You are still the same unit type, you've just got a different subtype. Finally, before we get into looking into how to build your Warriors of Chaos, let's have a quick look about the infantry changes. Now, we've talked about the scoring already just in previous videos, but the way it works is there are missions that have progressive scoring. What is progressive scoring? I initially thought it was the end of your turn. It's actually the end of every turn. So if you're playing the strategic locations, which is a lot of the missions in the actual match played book, there are objective markers. If you stand within 6 inches of them, at the end of every turn, you get 30 points for holding them. So there might be 2 to 4, well, there are 2 to 4 objectives that you can hold, which means that theoretically you can hold 4 objectives at the end of every turn. That's 12 times that you can score, assuming you're playing fixed, mission play. That is a huge amount of points that you need to be, thinking about scoring. Scoring is almost entirely core only, and it's almost entirely unit strength 10 plus only. There are a couple of exceptions to this, but don't worry about it. Just build as if they don't exist. Try and get as much unit strength 10 core in there as you can. And Warriors of Chaos do that really well. The Chaos Knights, we'll probably talk about those in terms of building some lists, but the actual infantry changes themselves mean that it's way more appealing to bring actual infantry models, which are going to be even though, Warriors of Chaos are expensive, they're still a good way to hold objectives, and they're incredibly tanky, very difficult to shift, good bunkers for characters. So, first of all, we've got Press of Battle. This means that instead of having 1 rank for your fighting rank, you have 2 ranks for your fighting rank. This is a huge buff to infantry. If you were, say, 6 wide, it was not uncommon to be charged by cavalry, even if it's something like Empire Cavalry, lose the entire fighting rank, only get to attack back with the unit champion because your opponent forgot to allocate an attack to the unit champion, as I do every time. I definitely need to get better at that. But now if you've got 2 ranks, you're not going to lose 12 models realistically, so you're probably getting some attacks back in, which is a really nice change. Press of Battle makes infantry significantly more usable, I would say, especially comboed with massed infantry giving +1 to your combat res if you outnumber your opponent. It doesn't matter if they're not an infantry unit. If you're an infantry unit, you outnumber your opponent, you get +1 to your combat res. Remember, this is only for heavy and regular infantry. Unfortunately, this doesn't apply to monstrous infantry, so it really does double down that we probably won't be seeing any Chaos Ogres or Chaos Trolls. Finally, there's the parry save. Now, if you were wearing full plate and having a shield, you won't get an effect from this because you're capped at a 3-up. But parry, if you're using a hand weapon and shield in combat, you get +1 to your combat, +1 to your armor save to a maximum of a 3+ armor save. How does that work? If you've got a heavy armor and shield, this means you're going to be getting a 3-up save in combat. If you've got a light armor and shield, you're going to be getting a 4-up save in combat. Given that AP2 is kind of the gold standard of AP in Old World, I would say that a 3-up armor save is pretty disgustingly hard to chew through. Lots of lancers coming at you. You're going to be taking 5-up saves unless they get 6s to wound with the armor bane, but you're going to find that you're going to have a lot more models surviving than you're expecting, and with that second rank of attacks from Press of Battle, you're going to be getting a lot of attacks in. This has been limited just a little bit in terms of the fighting rank rules changes and supporting attack changes. Basically, if you were super wide, previously, if you were 30 models wide and you were charged in the front, all 30 models could attack. Now, you can only attack for the models that are base to base and the ones that are within your movement value in terms of range. So with a 4-inch movement model, you can fight with models in base to base and then models that are within 4 inches of the enemy unit. It's a little bit convoluted on the page. In reality, it's quite simple. It's just going to mean that you do a little bit of measuring. But often, if we're seeing units of 5 to 7 wide infantry played a lot, or 5 to 7 wide cavalry, it's probably not going to matter too much. You're going to find that all of your models get to make attacks anyway. So, nice changes there. Frenzy has been nerfed. Previously, Frenzy was just a flat +1 attack if you had it. Now it's +1 attack on the charge only, kind of similar to Furious Charge. You still lose it if you lose combat, so Frenzy has lost value. But if you're looking at something like Khorne Knights still very good. They are going to be charging. Counter-charging would count as charging in terms of Frenzy, so you get the benefits there. A lot of good stuff. But probably less valuable in terms of Mark of Khorne ranked up units. Weapon selection. You can now change your weapon selection every turn, even if you're locked in combat. So you can go from being locked in combat, let's say you are charged by some lances, You go, okay, I need to survive. I'm going to go hand, weapon, shield. I'm going to have that 3-up armor save. You lose combat by a little bit. You give ground. Now you're trapped in a slog with your opponent. What are you going to do? Swap to your halberds. Halberds now, they do get better on the charge. I think I mentioned this as well. Yeah, halberds get better on the charge. They are now AP2 on the charge instead of AP1. Generally, infantry are in a weird spot where they don't really want to be charging, but having them as a flex option here is quite nice. All great weapons are good as well, but I do like a unit of Warriors of Chaos with halberds and hand weapon shields, because you're going to be getting 2 ranks of attacks with the hand weapon shields when you get charged, and then if you do need to follow up, or if you're locked in combat for a second round of combat and you've got better initiative, because Warriors of Chaos do have good initiative, you can maybe swing out with those halberds, something like that. So let's have a look at 4 different ways to build Warriors of Chaos. And I might not actually build out to perfect points, given that I'm doing 4 lists here. What I'm more trying to do is show you the general premises of how I'd be building these sorts of lists. So if we start with Wolves of the Sea, I think Wolves of the Sea are really interesting. Assuming we're playing with the match play guide restrictions, you can only have 4 of the same core unit, which is maybe more than you used to. You might have been playing with Rule of 3. Now, Marauder Tribe Berserks, I think, are really solid in terms of scoring infantry. They do have Frenzy, which is worse, but they're a toughness 4 skirmishing model, as you can see here. You can put them in open order, you'll often put them in skirmish, and they're also Relentless Warriors, which give them a 6-up ward against non-magical attacks. Remember, magical attacks have been nerfed, so you're going to see less of those than you were seeing previously. How are we looking at using these for scoring? Well, something like units of 14, I think, is probably a decent place to start. 14 of them, champion, flails, and ambushes is now really, really strong. I can't remember off the top of my head if all of them can have ambushes. I'm going to give, I'm fairly certain they can, so I'm just going to give you 4 units here of berserkers with ambush. That takes us above the cap here for core. Maybe we'll come back and address that in a second, but we'll see. What else do we want to put in? Well, in terms of the way I'm looking at the game is you want things that are super killy, you want things that are super good at scoring, and you want things that are good at removing scoring. So things that are good at removing scoring, I generally think about in terms of like knights, or things that can just kill people off objectives. What I do really like here are the gigantic spawn of chaos. These things were a little bit of a victim of all of the poison shooting that is in the meta. Now they're going to be really hard to interact with. Why are they hard to interact with? Well, they've got random movement, 3d6 here, which means that they can't be fled from, they can't be countercharged. So slower Brits of infantry are going to find it really difficult to not get hit by them. They've still got ridiculous facings where, you know, you don't have to be able to see your opponent to actually make a charge contact with a random mover. You just have to end up in the arc of the opponent that you're already in. So say you're stood, you know, I've got a unit here facing upwards, that's my unit, and you've got a gigantic spawn here, not looking at me, but in my flank. I roll an average roll of 10, and I just use that movement to wheel in and hit me in the side. I can't avoid you if you've got a spawn and you're next to me. So really strong there. The slower an opponent's army is, the better they are, you know, you are at getting through. And it's a model that has actual stomps, which are really nice. A decent amount of attacks. They're not, you know, it is random, and it is only AP1 on their attacks there. But you combo all that together, you can't be challenged out. So this is going to be one of the, I would say, this and the Warpfire Dragon really looking good in terms of being able to bully infantry units. Obviously, they are a little bit more at risk, because if your opponent's got an infantry unit with loads of great weapons, they're going to be getting attacks back realistically. But I think Gigantic Spawn are very good, so let's put 2 of those into score. Not into score, into kill. Do I want anything in special? Honestly, I could probably leave all of this stuff. Maybe we come back to it in terms of, you know, other things, but I'd be more tempted to put other units in like this in terms of picking up more scoring. I think that could be potentially very strong. We can still do, you know, the build here where we're looking at putting stuff in, and Wolves of the Sea, you can go Chaos Lord or Sorcerer Lord or Demon Prince. Sorry, Chaos Lord or Demon... Let me double check that one. I was right, I just had a brain fart. Wolves of the Sea, you can have a Chaos Lord or a Sorcerer Lord or a Demon Prince. Previously, that meant you couldn't have a good caster and also on top of that have a dragon. Now you absolutely can do that. So let's have a look at maybe how we'd equip an Exalted Champion. So if we're going to go with the dragon here, I really like Great Weapon, as previously mentioned. Yes, it hurts your armor save. I'm not so bothered. You've got triple saves in a second, and it means that we're going to be striking at Initiative 1, and we get the dragon to be able to strike at Initiative 4. So we're going to get the higher value here in case we get stuck in combat with, you know, an enemy unit champion. Marker Nurgle, absolute classic. Shield is good as well. And then in terms of magic items, there's not all that much that I'm super bothered about picking up. Let's go with Talisman of the Carrion Crow, and I like 3 Favours of the Gods. We can come back and tweak. This puts us at 486 points, so even though we've tilled this character up to a reasonable degree, we've given them a ward save, we've given them poison attacks from there as well. The Favour of the Gods is nice in terms of we've got 3 of those that give you rerolls to try and stop you from getting Stupidity on Gaze of the Gods, and we still have some points left. You could theoretically play around with the Gifts of Chaos. I'm not really sure there's anything in here that I'm super bothered about putting on. Obviously now you can't put Diabolic Splendor and Enchanting Aura on. Extra Arm always feels super expensive and it doesn't really fit in anymore. So there's a dragon, a 486 point Chaos Dragon, which is not something that I thought I'd get to say very often. Then we can also go Sorcerer Lord. And what are we going to use this Sorcerer Lord for? Well, I think this sort of build is good at standing on objectives, but maybe wants some pressure to deal with enemy units. So let's go with, let's say, Marker Tzeentch. And this is probably one of the builds where I'd look at actually giving myself, you know, a higher level wizard, because I'm probably going to be not taking Talisman of Protection. I'm not going to be taking Lore Familiar in terms of just picking the spells that are good in lore. I'm actually going to be rolling. I'm going to be swapping into Blue Fire, so I don't want to be messing around with that. You do also have, for Warriors of Chaos, the Tome of the Dark Gods. Really great item. Undivided only, and it lets you pick up all of the signature spells, or any and all signature spells from the Lore of Chaos. So Winds of Chaos is particularly poor. Acquiescence, giving a unit strikes last, can be good conditionally. Fleshy Abundance for +1 toughness is really nice. Blue Fire, obviously a great magic missile. D6 +3 strength 4 hits, AP -2 at 18-inch range. Just really nice stuff there. So that's nice to have in the back pocket. I value this less than I did previously, because now I'm probably going to be wanting to pick up a +1 to cast from Marker Tzeentch, so that's something we're going to work around. Spell Familiar to get that 5th spell, meaning that I'm more likely to get Fireball in battle magic, and Jobs are good. We are also going to go with... I think in this build... So we could go Skull of Catan, the previously mentioned +1/2 casting roll for all wizards within 3. It says enemy wizards as well. Realistically, if the enemy wizard's within 3 inches of you, something's gone very weird. But you can play around with other things. I think I'm pretty happy not bothering with Infernal Puppet, because I see this caster being more of a long-range caster. There's other stuff in here as well. Scepter of Power is fine, +1 to cast, you know, and dispel, but you take a Strength 10 AP3 hit after the effect's been resolved. You know what, honestly, maybe this would be worth going for, but I think we can just keep this caster relatively cheap. I think in the new world, we're maybe looking at a boys over toys sort of existence, where you want more bodies over anything else. And we're going to put them on a Chaos Steed, and we're going to give them some Marauder Horsemen to bunk them in with. When I've got my Tzeentch bunker here, I always like giving them a Musician in case they flee, giving them +1 to rally. Marauder Horsemen so you can challenge out enemy units, and then Cavalry Spears just because they're free as well. And let's go 7 feels like a decent strength there. What else do I want in this list? I wouldn't mind some cavalry to break my opponent. I also wouldn't mind another scoring unit, but these scoring units are probably fine. Maybe we just look at some Marauder Huskarls. So Huskarls, they have got the... Oh, they haven't got first charge. Okay. I'm less bothered about picking up this unit if it hasn't got first charge. Cavalry without first charge, I think you're going to find does suffer in terms of being able to crunch through enemy infantry who are able to stack quite a lot of modifiers now. So maybe we just go... A big unit of Skinwolves is solid. This is a nice sort of anti-meta pick, where if we're looking at what people are going to be bringing, they're going to be bringing infantry, they're going to be bringing cavalry. Their cavalry might well have countercharge, especially now that we've seen that Chaos Knights can have countercharge. This unit will not be able to be countercharged because it's an infantry unit. You can only countercharge into cavalry, monsters and chariots. So this gives you a unit that you can sort of just put out there, do a lot of damage on its own without needing to be supported, and it's hard for your opponent to interact with it, alongside the sort of gigantic spawn. So this list is about being able to do things without your opponent having a lot of play against you. We do need to make a general. I think I'm more interested in making the Sorcerer Lord the general here, because it's going to stay safer. This thing's impetuous, so we don't need to necessarily risk it, and we do just need to shave some points. So if we take one of the Wolves of the Sea off here, and then we probably just end up cutting a couple of Berserkers, something like this. And that leaves us with a decent-ish list where we've got Wolves of the Sea, plenty of relatively tough scoring units that can hold their own in combat, quite resistant to shooting. You don't have to put them in skirmish, you can put them in open order, but if your opponent's bringing a lot of ballistic skill shooting, giving you an extra layer of saves, that a -1 to hit, and then additionally on top of that, keep in mind you've got the 6-up ward against non-magical shooting. Skin Wolves, gigantic spawn of chaos to mess with your opponent, and of course you've got a dragon and a wizard sat up there as well. Heralds of Darkness, you all know Heralds of Darkness are my absolute favourite, and something I don't think I mentioned is, despite all of attacks in combat going at initiative step, so if you make your attacks at a unit champion and they die, you don't get to make any attacks past that initiative step, so you lose potentially your dragon attacks or your stomp attacks. Impact hits now are allocated before you go into a challenge, which means characters on chariots can kind of slam into the front of units with relative impunity. Not full impunity, but it gives you some ability to do so. What are we thinking in terms of putting attacks in? Well, Heralds of Darkness really, really love just sort of rocking around and being hard to interact with. I like a build where I go 2 chariots and a wizard, I think is probably the way I'd want to go. Now, the points on this do require some thinking through, and we could also go for the character bus here as well. So let's start off with a Sorcerer Lord on horse. They can't take the chosen chariots anyway, so you may as well go like so. We're going to go Demonology, and we are going to take Lore Familiar. This just means that we only get the 3 spells we want. We do give up the ability to take the Mark of Nurgle +1 toughness spell, but I think it's better just to keep this character relatively cheap by the time we've got a Chaos Steed. Yeah, 241 points. On a horse, Demonology, and then let's go for, I think we should give them a couple of Power Scrolls as well. The spells that you want to get off are hard to cast, so if we go down here, Demonic Vessel, it is a 9. This is a high casting value. You're getting it off 56% of the time on 2d6 before any modifiers. We're not going to make this a Tzeentch caster, it's not going to go into a Tzeentch unit, so we are wanting to have some reliability in terms of casting. +1 to cast would be very nice. We could go for... Is there anything else we want to pick up here? I'm not really bothered about rolling on the table of the gods for sorcerers anymore. It's not a bad place to put the Brazen Collar, because unit champions might be challenged out. Yeah, there we go. I'm happy with that in terms of the loadout for the Sorcerer Lord. Then we need to think about what are we going to bring in terms of actual chariot units, because I do like them. Maybe we go a Chaos Lord on foot. Sorry, not on foot. On steed to go in with the Sorcerer Lord, and we go Chaos Lords on horse are one of the few Ogre Blade builds left in the game, I would say, because they come with a ward save built in. So I think it just becomes 3 Favours of the Gods, Ogre Blade, General, sit on the back of a Chaos Steed. Steed and Mount, both options are good. The Mount gives you +1 wound and some better attacks. The Steed gives you +1 save. So you get a 2-up save here or your 5 wounds here. I like the plus save better. I think the value of the Demonic Mount is lesser now that you lose attacks and stomp attacks in challenges for overkill. So yeah, probably just keep it cheap like this. I think it is probably worth going Enchanting Aura on this character as well, although I think we're starting to really struggle in terms of points. No, we're looking okay in terms of points. And then let's go for a countercharging chariot here as well. Something to mess up our opponents. Now, keep in mind, if you have a mark, you do have to pay for the mark on the chariot as well. So we're going to hold off on marks for all of the characters so far, and we'll just see what we can squeeze in the end. I think I want to go with triple save on the Exalted Champion here, and I really like bringing reliability in terms of Battle Standard Bearer, War Banner, getting some combat res here, plus the impact hit combat res, plus the damage from the flail on the charge. We don't need a shield because we've got a 3-up save from the Chaos Chariot, and we're 10 points over. Okay, 10 points over is fine. I think the way that we fix this is we take off the Brazen Collar on the Wizard, and then we go and we'll put it into the unit champion, so that's not actually a problem. Yeah, perfect. I like this build. We've got a Lord and a Sorcerer Lord that are going to go into the unit of Chaos Knights we get to put in. They're going to do a lot of damage. The Exalted Champion can run around unsupported. We haven't got enough points to make it Nurgle, unfortunately, so let's make the Chaos Lord Nurgle, and the Exalted Champion's just going to have to cope without being Nurgle at all. But also Heralds of Darkness do have restrictions in terms of you've got to match your marks between the characters and the core units, so that's not the end of the world. Let's go for then a unit of Chaos Knights. We do want a big Death Star here. Normally I would have previously put Vanguard on this for the Banner of the Baying Hound. This was really nice to get your wizard into range for Dispel, but now that you can't charge if your Vanguard moved, I think just Icon of Darkness for -1 to be hit is really solid. Lancers and Shields always. Is this a unit that we want to mark? I don't think so. I always worry when we've got the Death Star here, the really expensive Death Star, that we're going to run away. Yes, we have got a battle standard barrier, but this unit probably wants to be running around independently, so I really like the rerolling Fear, Panic, and Terror. I do not want this unit running off the board. Even with the Leadership 9 on the Chaos Lord, it's so easy for things to go wrong. So let's leave them as undivided. I actually don't think the buffs that you get here are worth it enough to end up losing a unit. I'm more willing to take marks now on infantry units, I think, because they can't run away as far. So Chaos Knights, because of how far they flee, potentially an issue. I guess you don't have to use that. That doesn't make any sense because you don't have to use Swift Stride. Anyway, so we've got a unit. Let's start off with 14, and we'll come back and tweak that in a second if we need to. Is there anything that we want to put in rare? We can take a Warpfire Dragon, so we will take a Warpfire Dragon. Just really strong in terms of having that on the board. That's going to overcap us on points, though, I think. Yeah, so we may have to do some tweaks. We'll leave it as so for now, and then I can come back. Maybe we just put a Chosen Chariot in instead. In terms of other scoring, this is where I struggle a little bit. So units of 10 Warhounds with Vanguard are probably decent because you can get onto scoring points quite quickly, but they die so easily. So maybe one unit of Warhounds. I really do like units of 7 Marauder Horsemen with a unit champion and musician. Don't have to give them a mark. Give them shields for a point to keep them alive a bit better, holding the objectives. They can, they have skirmish. They also have open order, so you can use them just as a relatively cheap stand-on objective scoring unit. So let's go with 2 of these, and I think looking at this, we're going to have to drop the Warpfire Dragon to make this work. That's okay. We're going to end up with a Warpfire, a Knights list in terms of the Grand Army, so we'll have a look at a Warpfire Dragon in there. With that in mind, let's go with a Chosen Chariot. We'll give it Mark and Nurgle, because we have to go for 1, given the Chaos Lord is here. And do we want to just duplicate this? Yeah, let's go for 2 Chosen Chariots. We're in the Chosen Chariot detachment, after all. So one of them's undivided, and one of them is Mark and Nurgle, just to make the list legal, and we do have to drop 5 points somewhere. We can probably get away with dropping the musician on this unit, I think. Yeah, something like this for Heralds of Darkness. We've got a Lord and a Sorcerer Lord in the unit. We've got a countercharging battle standard bearer with a couple of points of combat rares, doing impact hits, doing loads of damage on the charge or the countercharge. Really nice there. Big bus of Chaos Knights. This unit remains to be seen. I'm not 100% sold on it. Maybe we just go with units of 5 and use them the way that you did. A couple of units of Marauder Horsemen that are unit strength 14, so they can score objectives well, and then a couple of Chosen Chariots. Again, they're able to do the counter charge, mess up your opponent who's trying to bring their own heavy cavalry in terms of bringing stuff to deal with infantry especially. Just very quickly, I realised when I was starting to fill out the next list, I hadn't put the Brazen Collar on the unit of Chaos Knights for the Heralds of Darkness, so do make sure you've got the Magic Resist in there. I don't think I've specifically mentioned Magic Resist in this video. Casting is harder to do. You're going to have a wizard in the units quite often, but if you can put Magic Resist on them as well, you absolutely should be doing so. It's really strong. It'd be great to have it on the dragon as well. It's just a little bit hard to fit them in, not in this list, but dragons in general. So Magic Resist 2 for 20 points. Super Steel. Put it on all of your units that you think are going to be valuable to have it on. Moving on to a Grand Army Warriors of Chaos list, and I just started bulking this out in terms of a lot of the same stuff that we talked about previously. So in terms of rare units, a Warpfire Dragon works really well here, and then we've got a big bus of Chaos Knights. Again, we've got Icon of Darkness for -1 to be shot, Lancers, Shields, full command, all of that good stuff. Again, keeping it undivided. We're probably going to go down to maybe something like 10 models. It doesn't have to be the biggest bus in the world if we're putting a couple of characters in there, because what we're going to be looking at doing is taking that Exalted Champion build from before, where we were putting it on a dragon. We're going to give it a couple of Favours of the Gods. I'd like to give it a Brazen Collar as well, and a regen save. So how many points does that come to? That's 480, and then we give it a great weapon and a shield. 486. That feels really solid. We are super tanky. We've got the regen there. We actually have the points to upgrade it to be the regen that also gives us poison attacks. Brazen Collar for magic resist 2. 2 favors of the gods. Just nice stuff to have. We are over in terms of points, so we can't give it a mark. Am I bothered about that? Maybe. We'd have to cut something. So we could lose the poison attacks. Yeah, let's lose the poison attacks and give it Mark and Nurgle here, which gives you rerolls of 6s to hit against you. Have to be rerolled. No gifts as well. And we may find that we need to shave some points on this model as well, because we're going to put in a Lord and a Sorcerer Lord again, just the same as we did before. But for now, that feels pretty solid. Again, I'd like this to be Mark and Nurgle. Let's just start by building it out as buff as we want it to be and sort of go from there. This model is probably going to be with the Knight, so it doesn't need the Brazen Collar itself, which is good because it's hard to fit that in with the Ogre Blade. Again, we've just got a nice choppy Chaos Lord. And rounding it out, we've got a Sorcerer Lord here, Chaos Steed. Mark and Nurgle would be nice if we can find the points for it. Level 3 Wizard, Demonology. And let's go Power Scroll Lore Familiar. So 2 Power Scrolls there. How many points are we over? 95 points over. That is a lot of points that we're going to have to shave here. So I think we're going to have to start off by making some sacrifices and just go for Undivided on all of them. The Mark of Nurgle is really nice. It is a good defensive boost, but now that Poison is less good, there are less reasons to take it. Poison wasn't why you took it, because it's only in combat, but when you're coming up against Poison in combat now, it's going to be less effective. So I'm just generally not super bothered about having it if I don't have to. We're going to drop one of the Power Scrolls here from the Sorcerer Lord. 1 Power Scroll and Lore Familiar. That feels pretty solid. Chaos Lord here. I don't really want to drop anything here. Okay. So what we might have to do is we are going to have to make some compromises with this list, unfortunately. I hate making compromises. So we're going to lose the Magic Resist. Magic Resist is really nice, and we're going to drop to a single favour of the gods. This model here, we're going to drop to a single favour of the gods as well. So we really are keeping it sort of lean and mean. Maybe because the compromises that we have to make in this list building phase, we'll find that it's not worth going for. Maybe it's better just to, you know, really lean into either the dragons or the character bus. But I think it's interesting to build it both ways. So we've got that here. Yeah, okay. Still 15 points too many. I think it's the Power Scroll. I think we're better off just trying to get the spells that we want in terms of going for Demonic Vessel, Demonic Vigor, and also that's where it becomes difficult. Probably Gathering Darkness, something like that. And having a little bit of difficulty in terms of casting the spells and still providing, you know, the magic defense in terms of you are a wizard, you can dispel into your opponent. We've got the magic resist here, so if anyone's casting into this unit, they're going to be facing a dispel at minus, you know, at +2 to dispel rolls and -2 to the actual casting rolls. So you've got a good advantage in terms of stopping the spells going off. But yeah, something like this feels pretty decent in terms of the loadout. So we've got a dragon, not bare bones dragon, but a cheaper dragon. We've got an Ogre Blade Lord. We've got a Sorcerer Lord who's there to try and cast some spells, but mostly provide magic defense. Chaos Knights here with the Brazen Collar, Icon of Darkness combo, Undivided. A couple of units of Marauders. I think these are interesting. You want cheap-ish infantry to sit on your objectives, and Marauders, they're only T3, but they do come with a 5-up armor save between light armor and shield. You could theoretically make one of them skirmishes. I'm not super in love with doing that when it's a unit as big as this, and they don't, you know, have too much tankiness in general. This is something that you kind of just want to push onto objectives, make your opponents, you know, come towards you, and then you can pick them up with your Chaos Knights. So this is less of a stand back and score list. This is I have something to make it so that you have to engage with me, or if you refuse to engage with me, we're sort of playing at parity. I can hold a couple of objectives quite comfortably. I can move forwards with the Chaos Knights, do a lot of damage, and then I've still got double dragon to run around with the Warpfire Dragon and the Exalted Champion, just to do huge amounts of damage back to you. And I think if you're playing dragons, you're going to want to double up on dragons, or have a dragon and like a griffin or a manticore or something like that, so you've got the option of putting a second unit in. The other option is just units of knights, but having fast flying units moving around together is much easier than doing it the other way around. So good stuff there in terms of a generic sort of knights warriors of chaos list, and we're 2 points under, so one of these units can go to 16 points there. Finally, we've got the generic Warriors of Chaos list. What are we thinking in terms of Warriors of Chaos in general? I still really like the double dragon that I was talking about, you know? Let's go Warpfire Dragon here. We don't need to give it anything else. And then we go an Exalted Champion on Dragon. This one we're going to have points for, because we're probably not going so heavy into aggressive characters on horses. So let's go like so. We're going to give it the regen with poison attacks again, brazen collar, 2 favors of the gods. 3 would be nice. We can come back and add to it if needs be. Oh nope, we capped out at 75 points. And we'll give it a great weapon as well, because we want it to be striking last, so the dragon gets to strike first. Good stuff there. Then we're definitely going to want at least 1 Sorcerer Lord. I think these things are really strong. If I'm playing a more sort of like sit back and score build, I really like a Mark of Tzeentch caster, I think. And I probably still want to go level 4 Wizard, and I still want to go, let's go here, Spell Familiar as well. And do I need the Infernal Puppet? No, probably not. Do I want a Ruby Ring of Ruin? Maybe. I'm on the fence about whether this is good enough now that it's only bound spell level 1 and it's 5 points more, but I think it's worth playing around with. We're still going to give you a Chaos Steed, and we're still going to give you a unit of 7 Marauder Horsemen with Cav Spears, Shields, and Mark of Tzeentch. Now, this is a great unit, as mentioned, because it's giving you +1 to cast, but it's also giving you a scoring unit, unit strength 14, so you're able to get in there and hold objectives. Really nice stuff. And this is just the best blaster that you can bring in the current game, I believe. We've got 200 points left on characters, so I'm thinking that we maybe look at bringing a BSB, and we go with some sort of big unit of warriors to hold some points as well. You might want to put more character support into this than I am currently. That's maybe something to play around with, but let's say we're going to go Battle Standard Bearer, and we will go... Is there anything in here that's super worth going for? I don't know that there is. Maybe we just give them -1 to be shot in case people start bringing large amounts of dwarf shooting. Maybe that's the answer. And I think we can give them a halberd here alongside a shield, and they'll be on foot. Do we want to give them... We'll give them the Strikes Last Door as well. And if we're doing this, let's go a little bit spicy. Let's give them Marcus Slanesh. Now, Marcus Slanesh gives you +1 initiative in the first round of combat, and you auto-pass Panic. So it's one of the Marks of Chaos I'm more comfortable going for, because one of the things that you're more likely to lose units to are panic tests. Fear and Terror is still, you know, a pain in the backside, but Terror is the thing that I'm really the most worried about. And again, let's make the General the Sorcerer Lord here just while we're looking at it. We have 35 points left here, so we could make some cuts and give this thing a ward save, sorry, a regen, but I think just a good armor save and a good ward save is good enough that you get built in through the armor and the chaos armor special rule that we've got here. So we've got Marcus Slanesh character. It starts off at initiative 4, which means with the enchanting aura you're making your opponent strikes last, so when they charge you they go from initiative 1 to initiative 4. Marcus Slanesh gives you +1 initiative on the first round of combat, so you're initiative 5, you're going to be striking first with your halberd. All good stuff there. And we're going to double down, and we're going to go for a huge unit here, which is going to be halberds, shields, Slanesh. And how many models do we want to go for? How big do we want to go for? Should we say 30? 30 is a bit too big, because we can't go that high. And we do want to give them magic resist as well with a brazen collar. So let's go down to 27 models. Do we want a banner in there? We want war banner in there as well. So we'll go down to 25 models. That feels pretty solid. So again, this unit has base initiative 4, as you'd see as soon as this wheel stops spinning. Let's see if it loads up this time. Anyway, you'll just have to trust me. Chaos Warriors have initiative 4. Giving them the Marcus Slanesh gives them +1 to their initiative. That means that you're going to be striking at initiative 5. So with halberds, you've now got 2 ranks of halberds, strength 5, AP 1, armor bane 1 when you're being charged, 2 ranks of attacks. Really good stuff there. Combos well with having some sort of buffing caster in there as well, but I think because we're quite immobile in this list, we've got a unit here that just wants to sit on points and score. We probably need this to be a ranged threat instead of going for a melee threat. I would like some more scoring units, though. I think having a secondary scoring unit is probably going to be quite valuable. So let's see what it comes out to if I go 15 full command light armor shields on this unit here. 137, so we'd have to shave some points. Is there anything that I can shave here? Probably don't want to drop anything from the dragon. That's fine. Honestly, maybe we just drop the Ruby Ring of Ruin. I'm not sure it's worth it at 35 points, given that we've already got a couple of good magic missiles in here. Warriors of Chaos don't need the Ruby Ring as much. And then this character, we can just go down to a single Favor of the Gods. We probably don't need to roll super aggressively with this thing. So then we're only 52 points over, and that's probably going to be 3... Of course, we're 1 point over. So we're going to go 22 Chaos Warriors and drop the Musician from the Marauders. Now, again, these aren't super... This isn't what you're 100% going to see on the table. This is just 4 lists, 4 directions, or really 3 directions, and then the mounted one is either you can go Grand Army or Heralds of Darkness, depending on how you want to play it, but it's 3 or 4 different ways of playing Warriors of Chaos that I think are interesting, and hopefully the list building process has been helpful in terms of talking about why I think they're helpful. If there's anything that you liked about this video or thought that maybe I missed and you'd like to see in future ones, obviously I am going to be looking at all of the factions, or as many as I get to. Hopefully I do manage to get through all of them. Do let me know, if there's anything that you think, oh, it would be really good to talk about this aspect of something, or there's something here that it would be worth considering when you talk about your next one. Let me know in the comments, and I will see if I can do anything to adjust them for future videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. If you've reached this point and you haven't already, I would really appreciate a like, a comment, a subscription if you haven't done those things. It just helps me get seen by more people, boost me up in the algorithm, all of the stuff that the YouTubers do like to say. If you would like to support me in my goal to become a full-time YouTuber, I would absolutely appreciate that. You can become a member below. There are various perks to those, name at the end of the videos, all that good stuff, but it also unlocks some VIP areas in Discord if you become a Longbeard or Ground Knight tier supporter. Those VIP sections are the only parts that are locked away in Discord. You don't have to be a member to join the Discord. I'd recommend that you should. We've got about 450, 500 people on there. It's a great place for discussion, a lot of fun. I do try and chime in as much as possible. And it's also where the Fix My List show lists are put, and also if you are one of the Grail Knight or Longbeard tier supporters, where you participate in choosing which list I play in the monthly Pick My List series.